show that all his ancestors are actually of English descent. Now, Pascoe still says he's Aboriginal, but he won't answer my questions on this or show his evidence. Pascoe also claims that Aborigines were not hunter-gatherers, as historians have said, but actually settled farmers. Even it claims that explorers like Charles Sturt and Thomas Mitchell told of seeing Aboriginal towns of 1,000 people with houses, with animal pens. But I've discovered that neither explorer said at all that they found towns of 1,000 with animal pens. That is an invention. But when I pointed out these things, we could prove the abuse, including abuse and mockery from half a dozen ABC presenters at least. They do not want to know. And a couple, like presenter Virginia Trioli, suggested I'm racist. Now, to discuss this, I talked earlier to Jacinta Price, former Outer Springs councillor, now with the Centre for Independent Studies. Jacinta Price, thanks so much for joining me. Why are so many journalists, white, most of them white, often on the ABC, why are they so keen to believe Bruce Pascoe?
Look, I think that nowadays so much of Aboriginal culture is romanticised, and because of this PC culture that we currently live in, there's this sort of push for this romanticism of culture by those who don't understand traditional culture, but also the white guilt that exists within our country is supportive, is what is pushing the support for Pascoe and what he's written, I believe, and in attempting to rewrite history, or at least make non-Indigenous Australia further feel some sort of responsibility for what's occurred in our country's history. And people are far more likely to believe in these romanticisms as opposed to fact.
It's so strange too, I remember when growing up in the Northern Territory, we used to read books like Are the Aborigines, We the Aborigines, great books. I think it was Douglas Lockwood, fantastic books, which romanticised Aborigines as they actually were, as tribal hunter-gatherers. Why this desperation to see them instead as farmers?
Look, it's almost as if, the worth of one's culture is being measured against, European culture. And, like Pascoe is attempting to liken us to be more like Europeans than actual Aboriginal people, and taking away the fact that we do have a very unique history ourselves. And I find it really strange, and I find it deeply insulting at the same time that he's attempting to do this, and at the same time, he's attempting to rally against the colonisers, if you like, but instead likening us more to them, to Europeans, then recognising us as uniquely Indigenous and taking any sense of pride in the complexities of hunter-gatherer culture, which that again is insulting. That we can't celebrate.
It's like the completion of the colonial project. Let's colonise now the idea of Aboriginality itself. I mean, it's just so strange. Can I go to some of the criticisms I've heard since this has become an issue? Is it racist to doubt that Bruce Pascoe is Aboriginal when genealogical records and Aboriginal groups say is not?
Well, when you have a situation, and quite often this is the case, when you are an Indigenous person, you've always known you're an Indigenous person, you've grown up that way, and, particularly when you've been engaged, your culture, your language, you know that there are individuals who will attempt to claim Aboriginality for their own personal gain, whatever that be, whether it's monetary gain, whether it's to ensure that you have status. But also there's the case of people doing this so that, because they know that there's a reluctance to challenge people who claim to be Indigenous when they are attempting to assert themselves as authorities on anything, any sort of given topic or issue regarding Indigenous Australia. So no, it is our responsibility to challenge such individuals, particularly in a situation where they are trying to assert themselves as an authority on anything Indigenous, or there's monetary gain involved as well. And we should be doing more of this, not less of it.
I'm just wondering if it's instead racist to be so dismissive of Aborigines being hunter-gatherers. I mean, the Saturday paper quoted one defender of Pascoe, and I think I know who this is. It was an anonymous Aboriginal leader, they said, and I don't think she is a leader. I wouldn't call her a leader, saying that people who called Aborigines hunter-gatherers wanted to see them as primitive, and I'm quoting here, rock apes. I mean, doesn't that suggest a sort of racist contempt for Aborigines as they actually were?
I mean, how can this individual claim to know what other people are in fact thinking? These are her own thoughts, or his own thoughts, or whoever it is. That is their own thoughts on what they think it means to be part of hunter-gatherer society. And again, it is diminishing the fact that hunter-gatherer society was a very complex way of life. The dreaming, the jukuraba, underpinned all of the entirety of Aboriginal society. And as I've said before, there is no evidence whatsoever throughout any of the jukuraba dreaming stories that I certainly grew up with, that I know of in other parts of the country, that suggest, that provide any support to any of Pascoe's claims. And anyone who knows their culture, traditional Aboriginal culture, will know that this is our oral history that's been handed down through generations. And if there was any evidence of agriculture or farming, to the degree that Pascoe is suggesting, then that would exist within our dreaming stories, and it simply doesn't exist. And it is racist to continue to put down this idea that hunter-gatherer society was primitive and anything ape-like. It was complex, and it is something to be celebrated and respected, because we were able to live this way for thousands of years.
And finally, Jacinta, the ABC's got a documentary planned for next year, two-part documentary, starring Pascoe and starring his theories. What do you think it should do with that documentary now that all this stuff has come to light about him misquoting his sources, misrepresenting the history, misrepresenting, in my opinion, his own past? What should it do with the documentary?
Well, I don't think they should name it a documentary. I think they should name it a mockumentary, and perhaps they want to pitch it to someone like Netflix, and it can be regarded as something like a similar alternate universe, perhaps like Game of Thrones, and maybe they can add some dragons into the mix as well.
Jacinta Price, thank you. Well, that actually would make it a great seller. I might invest in this thing. Thank you very much, Jacinta Price.
Thank you, Andrew.
As I said, they've been collecting the memories of her grandfather, and he was not a farmer. It's completely hunter-gatherer, and she's proud of it. After the break, the panel, a big win for